First, I would like to say a few words to citizens of Newfoundland and Labrador. I fully understand the frustration and the anger that you have, that you feel about the Churchill Falls contract. I think that this contract became a bad deal for Newfoundland and Labrador over time. And you are proud people like Quebecers. And I've been in business for a long time before politics, and I've learned that it's always better to have a win-win contract for the long term.
Francois Legault talking about the Churchill Falls deal, of course, today, reaching out to the premier out there, Andrew Furey as well. Tom Mulcair is standing by. Tom, give me your take on this. We talked about this earlier on.
Yeah.
The first question, Natasha and I kind of looked at ourselves and go, this is a deal that lasts till 2041. It's going to have to be renegotiated, which just in and of itself seems ridiculous.
Yeah, but at the time, you have to go back. A lot of people in the financial community in Montreal were tut-tutting, saying, look at the long-term undertaking. Look at how much Hydro-Quebec's putting on the table. Are they ever going to make their money back? So Hydro-Quebec took a risk at the time, and it's turned into a sweetheart deal. Why? Because there's been decades when there was galloping inflation, so the 0.2 cents per kilowatt hour has turned into peanuts. At the time, it wasn't. But Legault is playing it really smart. Showing that you understand the other person's position is smart. Nobody's expecting him to say, oh, so I will therefore tear up the deal, because obviously it benefits Quebec. But the signal that he's sending is, look, let's not wait 18 years. If you want to start getting more money for what's coming over the border now, let's start renegotiating the whole thing. You want to build the next step, which is the 2,000 megawatts at Gull Island, we'll be there for you. Because when they did the lower Churchill recently, it turned into a disaster. It almost bankrupted. Well, the province was technically bankrupt, and the federal government basically had to pay. They hired an Italian company because they didn't want to do, obviously, they weren't going to take the same engineers that actually know how to build dams in the cold, because they're based in Quebec. So they went to an Italian company that never worked in the cold and didn't know a lot about building dams. And who knew? The price, of course, spiraled out of control, and the rest is history. So they've not only had the bad deal to live with Quebec, but they did a very poor job on their own stuff. And the feds, thank goodness, had promised to backstop them for any losses. Now,
by the way, when I said ridiculous, I mean in terms of signing a deal for something like 50 years, not knowing what the future holds, but maybe in this business, it's the kind of thing that does get done.
Yeah, and at the same time, it wasn't guaranteed that it was always going to go one way.
Right.
And, there could have been new sources of energy. You sign a deal today for 50 years, someone comes up with cold fusion, and all of a sudden, you look at these antiques, which are hydro dams all over the place. So you've got to really assume a bit of modesty when you look at such a long-term deal. But getting back to the basics here, Quebec and Labrador, lots of business to be done together. Quebec has decent infrastructure up there. The whole theory of the most recent one that almost bankrupted them, they were going to put a massive electric cable under the Strait of Belle Isle between Labrador and the Newfoundland mainland and make their way on the other side somehow, miraculously, down to Nova Scotia. I don't think that's going to work. But at the same time, they were at least trying to get, the use of some of their own resources for the future. Quebec steps in. Legault shows some modesty, says that he understands. Those were well-chosen words. They were crafted for him, of course. And I think he did a great job of delivering them. And the average person is probably listening to the radio, on VOCM, which is the main station in St. John's. It's the voice of the common man, The average person is probably swearing at the radio when they hear Legault talking. Yeah. But at least they know that there's been an outstretched hand saying, let's not waste the next 18 years. Let's come up with a deal that's win-win, long-term for everybody.
Okay, so speaking of an outstretched hand, I want to talk about the fact that today marks 1 year since the war began in Ukraine, since Russia attacked Ukraine, not ostensibly, 100%. Zelensky will not negotiate with Putin. He thought it was all going to be over in 2 weeks, but he won't lose this war. So where do things go from here, Tom?
Well, even though it was pushed back by Canada, by the United States, having China say, it's time to sit down and start negotiating is an outstretched hand, to stay with the same image we just used in talking about another subject. I think that there are enough cool heads around the world to say, okay, we're not going to end this thing. in a shooting war. It's going to end really badly. And let's try to get people around the table and come up with a solution. Anybody who's ever seen any of these situations knows that that has to be the next move. Now, of course, the pig-headedness, and I guess there are stronger words that could be used, because I think that Putin sincerely appears unhinged now. His most recent intervention just before the one-year anniversary, he looked like a madman. I know it sounds like a caricature, but he really did look like he was not well in the head. So I think that at some point, cooler heads will prevail, both in the Kremlin and in the rest of Russia, and I think that there will be talks at some point. But for now, Ukraine and its closest allies, including Canada, which has really done well. I mean, we've offered the Leopard tanks. We're upping what we're sending them. They're staunch allies from day one. The Americans, of course, all proportions considered, have given a lot more. But in proportion to what we have, Canada's given a heck of a lot, and we're going to continue to do so.
So today we go back to Canadian politics. A couple of tough hours for Justin Trudeau, I would guess. Number one, the former chief electoral officer wants an independent inquiry into the Chinese interference in Canadian elections. And then we found out earlier in the afternoon, the Auditor General would like to see an inquiry into the whole McKinsey situation. Look, it's strike one and a half maybe for this government. And then today a poll comes out that shows the Conservatives, a Leger poll, voting intentions of Canadians, Conservatives 35%, Liberals 32%. That's actually closer than it has been.
Yeah, and the election campaign hasn't started, because as much as the Conservatives are good at taking shots at the Liberals for the past few months, the Liberals are no slouches when it comes to defining their adversary. I can tell you there's a little shop of horrors as we speak that's preparing the attack ads against Pierre Poilievre. And guess what? They've got a lot of material to work with. So, I mean, it's not going to be all one way. You might have noticed that CJAD, which is the main organization that deals with the Israeli and Jewish affairs here in Canada, they had a very harsh comment about Leslyn Lewis and a couple of other MPs that met with an absolute crank, anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim crank from the German parliament, and they were all over it right away. And of course, the Liberals moved in very well. They didn't have to give the first blow, but they moved in strongly against the Conservatives, who have been reeling from this. Poilievre had to issue a stark apology, and a very strong apology, because he's worked so hard to build up, his cred with that community. So the fight ain't over, because the campaign hasn't even started yet. But we are definitely in a pre-campaign period. They're softening each other up. The deal was signed on healthcare with Ontario the day before yesterday. Everything is lining up so that Trudeau can, if he wants, pull the plug. The polls showing that the Conservatives might be a few points ahead. I don't think that scares the Liberals as much as it impresses the pundits and the observers.
We spoke to Federal Health Minister Jean-Claude Duclos earlier today.
Yeah.
Actually, we're going to be playing that conversation at 5:35. And, he's very smooth was the word that Aaron used. He has this knack of being able to talk like a politician, but a real person at the same time. But the bottom line here, when it comes to the health deals with the provinces, is everyone kind of remains convinced that money isn't going to fix the problem, Tom.
Well, that was the thing we were talking about yesterday when I was up in Toronto with the C.D. Howe Institute. Everybody realizes that we've got to be more creative. In the mind of Doug Ford, that means more privatization. When you listen to the experts who have looked at this for a long time, they say you've got to be very careful where you tread on that, because it is a slippery slope that will lead to a two-tier healthcare system. So you've got to be careful with it. But there's no question that we've got a very bureaucratic, very top-heavy system. It's up to the provinces to work that out. Talking about people who are good politicians and good at explaining things, yes, I agree with your assessment of Duclos. But Quebec's Christian Dubé is masterful at that.
Yes.
And he's thinking of doing something that I think is long overdue, basically scrapping most of the Ministry of Health, keeping a few core functions like drafting legislation and regulations and being in contact with the legislative side at the National Assembly. But at the same time, he's saying he wants to create an agency. And if there are a couple of things in Ottawa that work, they are the Canada Revenue Agency and the agency that handles Canada Post. Why? Because they've been taken away. There used to be a Postmaster General. There used to be a ministry in charge of revenue. Now it's an agency. You can manage it more flexibly and differently. And I think that Christian Dubé is really onto something. This has been long overdue. The biggest problem that we've got, it's not that they eat up that much budget. They're only a few percentage of the overall budget. But they are the biggest cause of headaches, problems, and they are continually redoing things at the ministry. And I think it's high time that somebody with the experience of Christian Dubé says, okay, we're getting rid of most of you. We're going to roll this into something that is going to be run much more like a private company, and we'll get much better results. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be private delivery of healthcare. The actual organization overseeing it, the bureaucracy, that would be run more like Toyota than like the former Soviet Union.
Last thing, Tom, real quick. CCTV running a story suggesting that advisory council that Post Media said it was going to set up at the Montreal Gazette, even though we don't have a definitive decision here, it looks like they're going to reduce the number of people they are going to actually get rid of or forced to, take, their layoffs or whatever. Have you heard anything on that?
Yes. I do know that they've been doing a first round where essentially they've been offering packages to people with longer states of service. And yes, someone I know that I'll let that person make their own announcement, but has decided that they're moving on after many, many years there. And it broke my heart because it's one of the best people I've ever had the occasion to work with. But I also looked at the names on that list for that community advisory body. And boy, there were some great names in there. And I think it's a wonderful idea. I think that Jonathan Goldblum deserves a lot of credit for that idea. And I think that the people who are there are going to be able to help. Post Media is saying, look, we've got to make more money in the Montreal market, but we're not ready to sell the paper yet. So if you look at some of the solutions were found, like places like La Presse, people actually make donations to La Presse to keep it going, to have a quality paper there as well. Maybe the same sort of thing is going to be done with the Gazette.
Yeah, they've actually named the people on this advisory council. There's some very well-known names here, including Eric Maldoff, and I know you like him a lot, as do we.
He's an old buddy, and we've been through lots of battles together, and so he's somebody who understands a lot about the community. On the healthcare side, he is the person who has the best grip on the absolute devastating effects of Bill 96 on the healthcare sector. And it's interesting because it's the one sector where Legault has a one-line answer. No, there's something in there that says it doesn't apply. Yes, it does, and it's going to have a really bad effect on access to English language healthcare.
Let's hope that for all our friends and colleagues at the Gazette that those cuts are in fact reduced, and we find out that things are getting better, not worse.
Yeah, let's hope, because it's something that's incredibly important to the community. We've got to have a place where we can reflect, all of our concerns and things back to each other. I don't mind that they fire in the stuff from the National Post. I'm free to read it or not.
Yeah.
But I think that the local stuff, the actual Gazette, and by the way, I have a conflict of interest here that I should denounce. All at the end of elementary school, all through high school, and even into CJAD, I had a Gazette route. On average, 65 papers during the week.
Yeah,
and on average,
I don't think you have to disclose that, Tom. I think that's probably okay.
105 papers on Saturdays. So
Wow.
in every sense, I've always been close to the Gazette.
I used to deliver the Star. We have a big problem. Okay. Tom, you have a good weekend.